possible. Okay,
Will
now
there
we're
be pigs
going.
flying
I know, maybe. What
this
sorts of
Halloween?
animals? I know. Thanks for bringing that up. It's Halloween, and here we are. So I'm LJ or Laura Jane, and this is the Two New Show, segment 2 today. And I'm here with Janet Lynn, one of my dear friends and favorite people to collaborate with. So thanks for being here, Janet.
Glad to be here.
And I'm excited. You just started your YouTube channel and have been putting some awesome content on there. So we'll definitely make sure people know how to find that. You could even say it right now. What's the name of it right now?
It's devoted to the soul.
Devoted to the Soul. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you're doing that and really just like sharing who you are and just like what it's like to hang out with you as a friend. And, and even though you also are a trained coach and an artist and lots of things. So,
Well, it all works in together because, in fact, I had a dream a couple nights ago about how it all does work together and how we come here as whole and then we just separate ourselves. And then to come back together, you have to be devoted. It's the only way back.
Oh, I love that word too, because I've been feeling like we need a word to reflect that it is like it's important and it's like we need to be vigilant. I've been thinking about the word vigilant, but that doesn't sound very inviting. It's kind of sounds like or disciplined or something, but devoted really says it. It really does. Because it's like there are these different forces and directions we can go, right? And like you said, I think our conditioning has totally done it and separated us, especially from our soul.
Yeah. Well,
Unfortunately.
I mean, you can be, you have to be like a vigilante. You've got to freaking slay the stuff that doesn't, light you up and doesn't, people just get in this programmed situation where they just like, okay, got to go to work, to have the car, to have the house, to have that, to have the, when none of that is really what they're here for. Yes, you can have nice things. I said it a few days ago, actually, on my video about, people's, shoes, cars, I'm not saying don't have that stuff. What I'm saying is don't make it the most important thing in your life.
Yes.
So
Don't be
yes, have
devoted
the
to that,
beautiful things.
right?
Have the shoes you love, have the car you want, but don't make it what that's your life. Like if I don't have this car, then I'm nobody. If I don't have, this, added to my name, then who am I? Who am I to share if I'm not a lawyer, a doctor, and, I have my master's, my, doctorate. Like, it's all just an illusion. It's crazy to me.
Yes, yes. Well, and I think what you're helping us see is like otherwise we're devoted to those things, right? Don't be like we're
Right.
devoted to the lifestyle or the stuff or
Yeah.
the keeping up. And so, but I love that, like, what you're sharing is when your focus is on being devoted to your soul, then that's going to really like shift it all, right?
Right. Because when you do one thing different, it changes your whole life. People think like, oh, if I just do that, big deal. But it really is a big deal. It really is a big deal because when you do one thing different, it leads to two things and then you're become a different person.
And that's
But
like
it's little by
your
little. You
reasoning.
don't just wake up and then you're just like, oh, now I'm somebody else. It's
Mm,
like you have to take action, thought, word, deed, and it's just bit by bit that you change. And so you don't even probably see that you are
mm.
changing because it's in such small increments. But then one day you wake up and you're like, wow, my life is completely different.
And that like this devotion is not just like a big one day decision, but it's like
Yes.
little daily steps and
Yeah, not
moments
even
and
daily. I mean, it's
in
sometimes
yeah,
hourly, like,
moment to
like
moment.
the
Ooh,
12-step program. It's like, day by day, but even, it could be like minute by minute.
right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
that, but when you realize that that's your focus to be devoted to the soul. And I think this is like, that's a great way to come at this. And I really want to give you the chance to say whatever you want to say on the facing fear idea. But I can
Mm.
already see how when we're coming at it being more devoted to the soul, right? How much is that going to change our relationship with fear when we're like, okay, as a person who's devoted to my soul, now how am I going to work with fear in my life?
Well, I feel like fear is an illusion. We just make it up,
Oh,
mostly. I mean, for the most part. I mean, yes, there's things that we can be afraid of out there, but a lot of it's just in our mind of like, I'm afraid this will happen when you're just making that up. It could go either way. Like maybe that won't even happen, and then you're in this fear for no reason. Like fear is just
so
like a little talking point in your head going, yeah, well, this could happen. And, you know, it's like its own little entity in your
yes,
brain called a thought. So I've heard it said, don't believe all your thoughts. I mean,
right. And that's a
what
good
are we really
reason.
afraid of?
And do
Something that
you
hasn't
think,
even happened.
right, I think you're so right. And do you think, because I know you come from many years in like traditional religion, and now you're like self-directed in your spiritualness, but what do you think about this idea that there is an entity? Do you think there's any truth to that, that there is some sort of entity in any
You
way
mean
within
like
ourselves or
devil?
life
Are we
that
talking to the
is of
devil?
that kind of energy, yeah, that represents
Uh,
this fear? Or
well,
what do you think about that these
I
days?
think like we saw before, the monster lives in your head, not under your bed. So I think that the devil has
Mm.
actually gotten a bad rap. But the devil is someone out there, that's coming to get you. The devil is right here. You're the one that's uh diminishing yourself. You're the one that's playing the tricks on yourself. Like if you want to see the devil, look in the damn mirror, friend. Like straight up. Like there's no little, it's just like, well, to me it's like the God in the sky. I used to pray to the God in the sky. And so of course if you're praying to that God that you think is out there, then there might be a devil out there in your mind. But now that I don't pray to that God out there, because I think we are all, I mean, the cosmos, I think there's a greater force out there, like a force field. And I don't know how we were created or whatever, but I know that we are creators,
Mm,
and we are creating everything with everything we do.
mm,
So if that's true, if we are a creator and we have a piece of God, we like the ocean in a drop, we are the
yes.
ocean in a drop. So are we not
Yeah.
God in human form? And
Mm,
so then it would seem that the devil really lives in here, and we're our own undoing.
mm.
We can undo ourselves like that. It's almost like on cue. Hey, let's undo ourselves, because why not suffer some more? Just like heaven on earth, heaven and hell, a place on earth,
Mm.
because they live inside of you. You can have one hell of a day, friends, if you want to go there. What does that mean? I think that we
Mm.
are we're
Yes.
our worst
Ooh.
enemy, or we can be,
Ah, yes,
or
right.
we
So
can be
it's
our biggest
all,
cheerleader. And then if we're our
ooh.
biggest cheerleader, then we're just so full of ourselves. But I'm not talking about like, oh, look at me. I'm talking about like when you are really in alignment with your soul, then
Mm,
you can't be you're proud of yourself. And it's not a
mm.
bad thing. So I think that's another thing that's gotten a bad rap, like, oh, like she's so full of herself. How many times have you heard people say that? Oh, they're too big for their britches. It depends on, if you're coming from it, like, oh, look at me, or are you coming from it, but oh wow, look at me. I'm freaking like really in alignment with myself.
Mm,
I know
mm.
who I am. That's a different, you know,
Yeah, right.
context.
Especially if like I am God,
Yeah.
right? Or I am
Right.
a drop of the universe.
Right.
Then,
Like, how amazing is that?
mm,
If you look in the
mm,
mirror and you're like, wow, that's freaking amazing. I am a piece of God. I am God, because you're not just a piece. We're not like picking things apart. And that's another thing. Like, you think that, like, we bit and piece ourselves. We're like, oh, well, I like this piece, but I don't like that piece. Like, we're
mm,
here to become whole, to
mm.
become holy. I mean, when a little
Ooh.
baby's born, like they're just like so it's almost like they are holy, right?
Right.
Like that
Yeah.
first breath, you're just like, wow, this is amazing. And so we're just trying to get back there.
Mm, it's so true, right? It's like getting back to our nature and then just
Yeah,
recognizing that we've been trained out of that awareness.
right.
And wow.
And I think children see what we do rather than what we say because they're visual learners. So I think we got to really start young. And so, I mean, like, I think it would be a great practice for children, once they could write, to write down what they love so they won't forget.
Mm.
Because, people get to be teenagers and they don't even know what they love. They love what, the friend loves or whatever. And then they get to be adults and they're like, oh, I used to like that. But they don't even have any passion for things that light them up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Just
think
going
it's
through the
so true.
motions.
Yeah. That we get trained out of our awareness of that. And I think
People ought
getting
to
back
fear
to like,
that. People
yeah,
ought to
this,
fear that.
right. And yeah, the sole reasons to be in touch with what we love could be because maybe that's part of our connection to God or the universe, right? It's like, so
Yeah.
that's even more reason to be aware of it, much less living in it. Uh, yeah. And I feel like I want to ask you about, because you are someone who I think of as a pretty active artist, like you're making things or maker, that
Yeah.
you're aware how much you like to make
I'm a
things.
creator.
And so you make things that can be called art by other people, right? Um, and how does like fear play a role in that or not for you? Like if you
Oh,
think about doing something and you feel afraid about it, does that tell you you have to do it? Or yeah,
I'm
how do you
never
feel like your
afraid
art
when I'm
helps
doing
you with your
art.
fear? Ooh.
Never. You know why? Because it's like my soul space. It's just like,
Mm,
I mean, in fact, I was painting on the weekend and I was so into my painting and I had to go to the bathroom but I just didn't even want to get up and go because
yes,
I
that's
just
the
wanted to
best.
like keep on doing it, even though I mean, I could come right back to it, but
Mm,
it's just so enriching to my life. So, and
mm,
if I make a mistake, there was a time when I was painting where I'd be like, oh my gosh, if I make a mistake or, you know, but now it's just like if I make a mistake, I've covered over paintings that I've done hours and hours of work on and tons of paint. And I've just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to cover it all over and start again because I
mm,
just wasn't feeling it. So I have no fear of, making a mistake. What's the worst thing that can
mm.
happen?
Yes. And how much do you think that's translating into your everyday life? Like your practice on the canvas of not being afraid or realizing you can always rework it. Do you think that's like helping you see that about life or be that way
Well,
in
a
life?
tiny bit, but I feel like I
Yeah.
need to be more in because I love creating and I'm
Mm,
always writing and doing like little doodles and stuff like that, but to actually like sit down and be with for like, a big time period like, on the
mm,
weekend I painted and I was there for hours.
mm,
But I feel like that's when you really can see a difference because like I
mm,
mean you can see a little difference if you're just like, doing a little 10-minute writing or whatever, but it's not like being in it.
mm.
You know what I mean? So
Wow.
yes, do the daily practice. So,
Uh-huh.
but if you really want to feel it, then,
Ooh,
take
yeah.
some extended time.
And it seems like what you're talking about is like a flow state kind of a
Yeah.
thing, right? And so interesting how that is does seem to be a state where fear is not operating, right? And giving
Yeah.
ourselves a chance to experience that and like yeah, find things that we find flow through, right? And do more of that just
Yeah.
to get more used to that feeling. Wow.
Well,
I
if you
like
want to
that.
get out of fear, get in the divine flow because fear doesn't live there.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
it just doesn't live there. It can't.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
your heart is
Yes.
expanded like, all the way out to here. So where's fear have I mean, maybe fear is, past your arm reach, but it's not in this little place right here when you're in the
Ah,
flow of the divine.
I love that. It feels like it's like you're filled up with like a superpower where you're like
Right.
it can't touch me when I'm in this.
Yeah.
And
That
that's
song.
so cool
Can't
how
touch
it's
this.
yeah, the MC Hammer. Totally, right? And
Yeah.
that is such a fun remedy, like to think, ooh, what if yeah, really making it about getting into that divine flow. That's a really good term that I hadn't really used before. Divine flow, not just flow, but divine flow, and that
Yeah.
fear doesn't live there.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I know.
yeah.
That's good, right?
Yes, and how our creating can get us in that place instead of
Yeah.
like we need to get in that place in order to create, right? It's like the actual process of creating is part of getting us into that space, right?
Yeah.
The action of it. That's super interesting. Instead of like thinking we need to get out of the fear in order to find
Well,
the
you know what I
flow.
was thinking? Well, I know the art heals for one thing, and I'm trained in intentional creativity. It's a method of
Yeah.
painting and also coaching. And I was thinking like people that have like anxiety, depression, things that are seem like the devil's got them,
Yeah.
because they just can't get out of their head.
Right.
If they could do something creative like painting, I mean, just to like put your hand on the canvas, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to have any skill whatsoever. I mean, whatever comes out is divine creation. So,
Mm,
like, that gets you so much out of your head. And I feel like it would absolutely could heal the world.
yes.
I mean,
Yes.
you could forget the medications and you could really rely on creativity.
Right. Right. I so
Yeah.
agree. And I get so excited about because when I was after my psychology graduate school, I was studying some expressive arts therapy. And ever
Mm.
since then, I've been so excited about just the idea of any form of art or just the expressive healing qualities
Oh.
of it and knowing like it's all energy too. It's such energy work
Mm.
to express and even like release things, right? And now what we know about trauma and how we store it in the body and just to
Right.
consider all that's possible with things that can feel like art, right? And it's so exciting. And it's just, but it's in, yeah, it's interesting because at this time in the world, I think a lot of people think of those things like art are just for people who are artists, right? And
No.
I'm not good at that. And it's such a
Oh,
tragedy, right? Because those
right.
can be such a form of like healing and transformation and a place to really transform things like fear, right? Or
Yeah.
yeah, and the many faces of it. Oh,
I mean, it's almost like Shakespeare, like a tragedy, a travesty that people are
it
told,
really
oh, that's
is.
not good. Like art is subjective. Like, who's to say that's not good or what's good and what's bad? Like, there is nothing. If you're just creating, and here's the thing, you're creating to create, you're not creating for an end result. And
Mm.
especially the way that I was taught with the intentional creativity, like, you're just like in flow. So, I
Yes,
mean,
to see it as that's the reason you're doing
yeah,
it, not for what comes out on the page. And I
yeah,
love the first time I heard about that was at the preschool we had our kids at that
mm,
was play based, and she would help us focus on process over product, like with the
yes,
kids. And then I think
right.
Julia Cameron probably talks about that too in the artist way, it seems like. But yeah, if we could get back to letting things like forms of things that feel like art for us as about the process of it versus the product. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Yeah. And just, and well, basically, then you could, I'm sure you're going to say anything we do, right? That's
right. Exactly what you must have been reading my mind.
I'm like, oh, because yeah, bringing it to like everything we're
Yeah,
doing is a form of creating and a place
right.
that we can be being more
Well, yeah, and so I'm
artistic.
gonna I'm gonna have a course, and it's called the Art of Devotion. And so
Yes.
I like put all these little papers, and I wrote down all the things that we're going to be doing in the course.
Ooh,
I mean, so
fun.
now I'm just like, is it like a 6 month course? Because look at all these things that we're going to be learning.
Ooh. So you're
Like the
having
art
fun
of
with the
devotion
process.
and
Yes.
remembrance and intention, and like there's so many juicy things in here. It's just like I want to eat these papers,
Mm.
like they're cookies because they're so delicious. I mean, you were just saying something, and just like when you're like in that flow, I mean, it's like it fills you, so you're not like hungering, because people fill themselves with, stuff. Like they fill themselves, like me. I have like freaking, I don't know, 50 decks of cards. Like, really? Is that necessary? I mean, I just feel myself. I have purses. So I've been there. I've been that person that just filled themselves with stuff.
Mm.
And it never was satisfying. It might be satisfying for a minute. You're like, oh, good, I got something new. But when you are satisfied with like your soul satisfaction, I mean, you could just like feel it, taste it. I mean, just like, I mean,
Mm.
it's like you have a lemon in your mouth, like, or, you know, you're sucking on a piece of chocolate. You know, have you ever done that? Like sucked on a piece of
Mm.
chocolate
Mhm,
and just like
mhm.
tasted it all. And that's what
Yeah.
like creativity is. Like, it's just
Mm,
like so satisfying.
mm.
I love
Yes,
it.
right, and it is such a, medicine, and then
Right.
it's like getting back to like what we are focusing on as part of like what's bringing up fear. It's like
Mm,
how much does that change what we're focusing on when we're getting into what gets us into divine flow and doing just more creating. It's just like such a different focus, right,
you know what
than
I'm thinking right now?
ruminating. Mm.
Let me see. Okay, I'm going to show you a card I pulled today.
Mhm.
And so this is the card I pulled today, and it's called self examination.
Mm.
But you know what I think we fear most? I think we fear ourself.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. But tell us more what you
Because I
mean.
have that poem on, I used to have it on my website. Um, what is that? You know, we fear our greatness.
Mm.
I mean, and why
Right?
are
And
we
isn't that
afraid of that?
ironic? It's like we want to be
Right,
great too, but then we
right,
fear it. And that's
right.
just like this internal conflict that
R-
has been placed into us. I don't know that we're born with that, but certainly I think just the way many of us
Right.
are raised puts us in that situation.
Yeah, and
Isn't
the
that
card I
wild?
pulled before this that I set it back in there was the Ouroboros, you know, the snake that's eating itself, like, you know, what
Mm,
I'm talking about.
yeah.
And so to me it meant completion, but what is consuming us, you know?
Mm.
Like, I don't
Well, and
know.
that's where like fear really can consume
Right.
us, right? And
Right.
especially if we're not being vigilant in kind of choosing the opposite, to be devoted to the soul. Like your wording is so perfect, is going to be very different than like being consumed by fear, right?
Right.
Those are two different stances.
Well, and you know what? If fear is out there, like, you know, we're afraid, like, say we're in this cage and the door is open. And so we're afraid of walking beyond what we already know. Like, we're comfortable, you know, we're like, okay, this is great. I've done this. I
Yeah,
do it, you know, it's been my
right.
life.
Yeah.
And I mean, just now am I recognizing, I mean, I knew the door was open and I've seen the cage and all of that, but only now am I recognizing that I don't know. There's no way of knowing. So you're going to live your life in the unknown, regardless of
Right.
whether you think you're safe or not. So why not, you know, just like freaking leap and do what you want to do? Like, you know, what are you afraid of? What could happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Like
think
this just
you think
real.
you're safe where you are, but you're not.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
any safer if you're here or there.
Mm,
And the
mm.
door's open, so why not walk through?
Yeah. It's like such wisdom, like life wisdom, to realize. I've been really realizing that too, how it's so ironic that we're afraid of uncertainty, but yet things are always uncertain.
Right?
And so it's crazy to be afraid of it. It's like it's
Right.
absolutely like insanity, like to be
Yeah.
afraid of something that is always true.
Right. Right. Oh my
So
gosh.
I think it is like coming back into our wholeness, like you say it. I love that, is realizing that like, oh wow,
Yeah.
things are always uncertain.
Right.
So and then kind of realizing your safety is understanding safety differently,
Right.
right?
Right. It's
So
funny
that
that
you
you've been
can.
realizing that and I've been realizing that. And you know, and we're thinkers, so I mean,
Yeah. So and I think that is where it's like maybe it is like an evolution of consciousness that's happening. But I think it is, because so many are um, probably maybe battling with fear more than ever, just because of all the ways
yeah.
that we're aware of the state of
Right.
the world and the possibilities.
Right.
And um, and just have a lot of encouragement to be in fear, right? So it's,
Right.
um, but yeah, I love how it like getting really like spiritual about it is such an answer, and just being okay. Well, but if I'm devoted to my soul, and if I'm aiming to become more whole, right,
Yeah.
and live in divine flow, that's such a different focus, right? It really
You're
is.
a rapper,
That's
Laura
like
Jane.
heaven on. Was that?
You're a rapper.
I could enjoy that. But right, it's such an elevated um, goal,
Right. Well, you know
right?
what? I was also thinking fear. It just breaks down your body. I
We
mean,
know
it
that
like
more than
really
ever.
does something on your immune system
Oh, that's the
and
thing
like,
too. It's
yeah,
it's it's scary what fear can actually do, though. It's
right. It can take
I
you
just
down. It can take you out.
yeah, because that's really what's behind a lot of stress, isn't it?
Right.
Is fear, and we now know more than ever that stress is terrible on the body and the cause of most disease. And
Right.
right,
So
and
is fear really the root of all evil? I mean,
mm. Well, I mean, I guess it could be called that, right? But that's where we just have to really choose our because it's something we're doing to ourselves, like you said,
right.
and then to realize that it's making us sick too, and tired and miserable is for real, right?
Yeah.
It's no joke. Yeah, wow. And I feel like I never really realized how much stress is related to fear, like all of it, right? All
Yeah.
stress, pretty much, right, is fear
Yeah.
based on some level.
Right.
So interesting. So if we want to feel less stress, it is really a lot about dealing with our relationship and understanding of fear.
Right. And so
Wow.
how can you get out of fear? You have to get
Yeah.
out of your own way and do something you've never done before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you're coming from a spiritual orientation too, or feeling more connected, that changes it all too. That you're like, I am, when you realize I am God, right? Or a piece of God or a child of God, then you're feeling different about your choices and your power, right? And
Yeah.
oh, and even how to interpret fear. It's wild. It's like it's such serious business, really, right? Even as it's like there are these really fun heavenly answers. Thank God, it doesn't have to be. Um, but yeah, that's why I love your word devoted, because it has all that in there. That it implies the seriousness of it, right? But then it
Well, I
has
didn't think of
this
that myself, you know.
poetry to it too,
I
which
didn't think
is
of that myself. I was actually painting
yeah.
out of the blue and there it
Mm-hmm.
came,
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
like
So that
dropped in. That's
that
another thing.
too.
Like when you're in the flow of like doing art, just messages will come to you. It's just like you're a divine channel.
Right. And that's just even more good reason to get
I
ourselves
know.
in these states. Because when we're like, if we think we're interested in spirituality and God or any of these things, or whatever we call it, then heck yeah, let's do things to get us in that divine flow. Ooh, I love this divine flow.
Isn't
It's
that
such a
fun
great,
too? It's so
it
fun
really
when you
is
get
like,
like messages that you're like, "Ooh, I like that."
yeah. And then yeah, to just consider that as like a life goal to get into divine flow more, right? Like, so what have
I
you
know.
been up to? Oh, just getting into divine flow.
I know, right?
What are we here to learn? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really fun. It's just such the opposite focus too of fear, right? Fear,
Yeah.
when I think about fear, it feels like contracting and
Right.
limiting and like stagnation too, right? And I love how divine
Yeah.
flow implies like action and movement, and that makes sense too as more our nature, right? Because our bodies are even built to always be moving and there's so much energy. So like anything that's like contracting or stagnating doesn't go with our nature, right? Like how
Right.
fear could affect us.
Well, you know
So
what
interesting.
I think of as divine flow, where because I'm very in my astrological chart, I'm very air and water.
Yeah.
So it's like where divine meets the water. So
Mm,
it's like divine flow.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean,
So
like
like
swim in
air
that. How
meeting
good
water.
does that
Uh-huh.
feel, right?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's like embodiment. That's a whole practice when you're just like it's a whole body thing.
Right? That's where it is, like mind, body, spirit, and it's like a
Yeah,
full embodiment, right? So not just like
right,
wrestling with our thoughts about it, but
right.
getting into the embodiment of it. Yeah, and what helps us do that? That is such a fun question and priority even, right? To
Yeah,
find that for ourselves and to make it a priority. Ooh. And to be like vigilant about that. I think, yeah,
right.
because in the past I feel like some of these things have felt like kind of airy fairy and oh sure, in the best life we might, but it's like, is it really that integral to my well-being, to do these things, but to get me into divine flow even, right? But it's like, well, yeah, because the opposite is pretty shitty, and that's where a lot of us are living. If so it's like it is like being a vigilante about getting into divine flow, because otherwise
Right.
we're probably what's the opposite of divine flow?
Fear.
Fearful lack of flow, right? I don't know, whatever the opposite of flow.
Well,
Fearful
fearful
stagnation,
stagnation.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
and which is not divine. It's nice to see that fear isn't divine.
right. It just can't live. They can't live together.
Mm, wow. And that yeah, when we understand we are divine, if we like that idea and we want to get into it, that
Well,
does
it
involve being
doesn't
different
matter if
about
we like
fear.
it, the idea. It is the fact.
Right?
It
Yeah.
just is. I mean, I would say that's a truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are divine. Whether you know
Mm.
it, remember it, you want to like toss it out the window, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And
Imagine if we all saw each other through those eyes.
yes, right.
I
Well,
mean, that's
that's
a
really
tall
what that,
order, but like
yeah.
imagine if you saw everybody as as yourself and as the divine.
Yeah, right. And that's really what like that word namaste is supposed to mean. Like it's in
Yeah.
yoga and other traditions. The light in me, the divine in you, me is bowing to that in you. And I was just hearing some Florence Scovel Shin this
Oh, I
morning, and
love
she
her.
was talking about seeing the face of God in every person and everything.
Well,
And
you know where it starts? You have to see the God in yourself.
yes, right.
Well,
Hopefully
yeah,
I'm still
because we
here.
don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are.
Mm, that yeah could start to make even more sense because we hear that kind of thing, right? But it's like as we are, so as we, the embodiment that we're in, right? So
Yeah.
like back to like being devoted to the soul or just this remembrance that we are a soul or we have a soul, right? Then when we are that, right, then that's really going to change what we're creating. And what was it? How was the quote you just said? We don't from
We
what we
don't see
are.
things as they are. We see them as we are.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
So
everybody
when
can look
we
at
are
the
in
same
that
thing.
awareness,
Like you and I, if we lined up a whole line of people and they were looking at something, everyone would see it differently. And
right?
so, like,
Yes.
just like when you're reading a book, you might like pass over something and then you go back and read it another time and you're like, oh my gosh, I missed that. Well, you
Mm,
missed it because now you weren't the same person then as you are now.
mm, mm. I love
And we
that.
also don't get all the information at once. So it's just like, you'll get a little information here and a little information here as along the way. It's like breadcrumbs. So the more you go on your path, the more it'll open up.
Mm,
It's like
mm.
you're expanding, into yourself.
Yes, right. And yeah, so I feel like this is fun to think like what's on the other side of fear in a sense, right? Or just kind of
Yeah.
what are we going for instead? Right.
Yeah.
And that can be the why, why to realize when we feel it, it's like something coming from within ourselves. And then to realize that the remedy could be doing more things that get us in divine flow, right? And just,
Well, and what
ooh,
about this? What if, we're afraid of uncertainty? That's one of the people, everybody wants certainty. That's
yeah,
just a thing. It's really a thing. So, what if it was like you just said? Like, what if we were excited to see what was out there and so we weren't held back? Because, like you said, certainty is just, there's nothing really certain.
right. Yeah.
So, what
It's
if
such an
we just took a
illusion,
different approach to it and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what's over there?
right? Which is what people like Michael Beckwith will say, like,
Yeah.
act feel like something wonderful is about to happen,
Right.
and I guess that comes back to like that Albert Einstein quote about eventually we have to decide if we think the universe is a friendly place or not, right? And
Right.
that's where it's kind of like coming back to the spirituality, like,
Well, and I think people,
okay,
you
it's
know,
uncertain, do you expect, and what do you expect? And I was listening to Florence too talk about faith is expectation, and like every day look at what are you expecting, so
right.
yeah.
Well, and that's what, you know what? People that expect stuff to go wrong, it seems like their stuff just keeps going wrong. And
Right,
they're just
yeah,
like, oh my gosh, here we are again. Where
right, because
people that like Michael Beckworth that are just like, wow, I can't wait to see what's over there. Good stuff just keeps on coming to them.
right, I think there is a truth to if our mind is creating and we are creators and our focus is everything and our imagination is where it's all being created, then I do think that's true, yeah. So I really
Yeah.
want to keep integrating that more into my embodiment, right? Because a lot of
Right.
these things I feel like I can like intellectually understand, but then I'm
Right.
still have been practicing very differently.
Well, yeah, me too. I mean, just like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
yeah.
learning process. And you might take, 3 steps forward and then you might take 2 back, like, and
Right,
you might even
right.
take 4 back, but you just got to get up and keep on going
Yes,
towards.
that's the thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
the
And don't beat yourself
loving
up. You're
ourselves
like,
through
oh, here
that.
I am again,
Hmm, hmm.
because, you know, it takes time. It's like a lifetime journey.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And to
Yeah.
have some compassion with ourselves about that. And that's where I think it is so important, though, the things that we're doing. Like, I know you and I do a lot of journaling and different forms, which I feel like is a form of meditation, right? And then
Yeah.
other forms of meditation and just ways that we can like be reflecting and rewiring. And then also the people around us, too, right? And the conversations we're having and the influences that they're having on us and vice versa is important in this whole thing, right? Because it is going to
Yeah.
affect what decisions we make and what paradigms we're in. So yeah,
Imagine
it's
this. Talk about a place, heaven, I mean, hell on earth, a room where everybody's afraid.
yeah,
Oh my
which is going
gosh.
on a lot of times in the world right
Right?
now,
Can you
right?
that
Even if we
energy?
don't realize it, but
Oh my gosh, it'll suck
everybody
the life out of you.
afraid for different reasons, right? But that's kind of the truth of the world, and or even just recently
Yeah.
with like the pandemic, right? Like a lot of people were just in a room together, afraid, and um, yeah. So
Yeah. That will
it's
suck the life out of you.
isn't that interesting that it is like draining.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, because it's like the opposite of our nature.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What gives you life is where you should go towards. And then what drains you,
Mm,
you should be afraid of that,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Be afraid of what drains you. So yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'd like to add into my practices just doing more things like just making lists of things I see that I am afraid of, right? If on whatever topics,
Ooh,
just to be aware.
I don't know about that.
Really, what do you think about that? I just feel like looking
Well,
at what I have been afraid of
I
so I
think you're
can be
giving
aware
that
of it.
I think by writing it down all that, it might be given a energy that doesn't
Right?
need
I'm
to be
always
there.
I don't want to do that. Well, I think just so that I can then like maybe write about it from a more connected place, like I might feel this, but like my soul knows that, so
Oh,
as
yeah,
long as I
if you
can like
turned it
flip it,
around.
yeah, take time to
Yeah,
flip it to how do I really want to feel about these things.
right.
Because yeah, I think there's been a lot of fears going on and I don't even know it. And so I
Yeah.
think to just become more aware of what's under the surface, and then
Well,
deciding how I want to
well,
believe.
Byam Katie has that thing.
Yes.
I haven't studied a
Uh-huh.
lot of her, but is this true?
Yes, that's right. Her 4 questions. Yeah, I think you're right. Bringing it back to that, like looking at the thought that's behind it and then really questioning it practically, and especially from a more spiritually connected place, right?
Yeah,
Especially if I'm like wanting to own that I am God, then what's true?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Uh, it's
Well,
but it's
I
exciting.
I just hope that people aren't afraid to look in the mirror because a lot of people just don't want to see, what they've created. Like,
Yes,
you know, if you are the creator of your
absolutely.
life, it's a lot about taking responsibility.
Yeah, it really is. And that I think you're right that it's scary to look in the mirror because, like you said earlier, which is hilarious, about like if you want to see the devil, look in the mirror, right? Because it's us doing it to ourselves, and yeah, so maybe even that aspect in ourselves would make us not want to look in the mirror because we think it's going to be too scary,
Hey,
right,
what
to
about
look at
this when people
ourselves.
say the devil made me do it?
Mm,
Okay, what devil would that be?
yeah, right. Well,
You're the only one
exactly.
in charge of what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. So
And
it's,
yet people really actually think that something out there made them do XYZ.
yeah, right, which is kind of a lack of responsibility, right? That's the opposite of empowerment, to be like it's something outside of me instead of something within me that I can manage and move away from, right? Or just
Yeah.
and be aware of and
Ooh, what
be
about this?
vigilant.
You know, if God is the master, then you better start mastering the devil,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I think that is the thing, like being aware of it as an old habit and pattern, if anything, right?
Right.
That it has been strong in most of us, and
Yeah.
the world is trying to keep it strong. So yeah, that we do need to like
Yeah.
daily be like wiping it, away at
Yeah. Well,
my
and another
conscience.
thing, whatever we're talking about here, like it's really for us, and then other people are listening to it. So
For
if
sure,
people
right?
are like, oh, they think they know everything, but we're just talking to ourselves because
Right.
we need to learn this.
Yes, yes. And that's what
Everybody
I
is
do
here on a
love.
learning journey.
Yes, I
So,
love that. I feel like that's what I'm sharing and where I'm coming from is not trying
yeah,
to be, especially talking about things like facing fear. I'm not like,
right.
hey, let's talk about this because I've figured it out and mastered it and I'm an expert
Right.
and here's what you should do. It's
Right.
like, I'm curious too. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I
So, yeah,
know,
I hope that
right?
that's
Well, and that's what
a more
another thing
inviting
about
approach.
to be in wholeness is you have to be curious. You have to stay curious. Like the
Mm,
more, like children, they go outside and everything is wondrous. And I feel
mm,
like the more you see the wonder around you, the more connected you are to your soul.
yes, if that's part
Like,
of operating from that level, right?
you're
Like
right.
Florence Scovel Shinn has a quote of "I look with wonder at that which is before me." So,
Oh,
right, yes. And I was just starting to think of that quote as you brought in wondrous. So, yeah, I think it really is about, and a lot of the teachers will say it's like becoming more childlike. And maybe it's because that's before those fears too were so rooted into our um, being, right? Those earlier years before
well,
the
you know what
world
makes
told
me
us to be
think
afraid.
is there was a time, I have 5 kids, and so we went to the Grand Canyon. I think we had 4 of them at that time. And it was just like, okay, I saw that, let's go. I mean, I was just like so, like, kids and like all the stuff, life
Hmm.
stuff. And so I was just like, okay, yeah, good, that's good. Now I would want to go there and I would want to live there. I would never want to leave.
Yeah.
But when you're in that headspace, the where you're just like, you know, then it's just like nature doesn't really, it doesn't give you the same effect as when you're in looking with different eyes, more like
Mm-hmm.
spiritual eyes. When you're looking with,
Mm.
like the mundane, like I got to get this done, it's like check that off, we went to the Grand Canyon. What a
Yeah.
different feeling, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And it's easy to get in that mode, too
Right.
easy, but me too. And yeah, so I think that's again about the why of leaning more towards reveling, right, and being present, because it's again like a tragedy how many of us are in that mode, and then just super unaware of even why we're feeling the way we're feeling, right?
Well, even in relationship, I mean, like
Mm,
relationships, like there's so many times that we don't value the time we have with somebody and then
oh,
they're gone. Like,
mhm.
like we don't know how much time we have with anybody.
Right.
So when
Yes.
to be really present with somebody, what a gift.
You're so right. And yeah, like if we're afraid of that truth that we are mortal and the people we love are too, then like a functional response would be to be more present for the time we do have with each other, right? Because that's real, and that's
Right.
valuing it's the truth of the uncertainty, right? That you don't
Yeah.
know if you're going to have another chance to talk to them or be with them, or yeah. So it's wisdom. That's like letting that's where you could like let a fear like I'm afraid that I may not get more time with them, help you respond in a way that's actually more functional, right? They're like, okay, then I'm going to value my time with them, right? Instead of just having
Right.
this underlying fear that even though you don't do anything differently, right? It's interesting
Right.
how we can be more
Well, it's all
wise
like a
about it.
catch 22 or a paradox, like you're just like back and forth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
fear
Right.
has its, you know, I think it has value in some
Yeah.
situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just that
Right.
when you give it the power
Mm.
over you,
Mm.
because like your ego is here for a reason, you have a body for a reason, and the ego can protect you, but when you give it the whole power is when I think you get in trouble.
Mm. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to balance. We're here like juggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to express it, and that it's going to be part of what we're juggling, but
Yeah.
here's how we can do that most gracefully, perhaps, or here's like how can we do that more gracefully
We
is the
just hope
question.
that fear doesn't hit us in the head,
Uh-huh.
because
Right.
that's what happens. It's like when you don't learn a lesson, then it comes stronger and stronger. So you're just like throwing the balls, and then you're like, oh, bonk,
Mm,
wake up,
for sure. Right. Yeah.
quit
Mm,
clowning around. This
gosh,
is your life.
this has me so excited. Well, I knew we'd have no problem filling up some time. I took you a little longer. It's more like 10:30 now, but
Okay.
um, so well, I guess we could start to call it to a close, but is there anything else that you want to say along the
Mm.
lines of any of this that you didn't get to say or that's coming through right now?
Well, it's always just, yummy to talk to you about
Right? I know.
stuff.
Right? And yeah, well, I would like to find a way to do this more consistently, where someone like you would be like a regular contributor. So let's talk about that. Where it'd be like if you wanted to, like once a week, every this day, we get to talk to
Yeah.
Janet. So yeah, and well, so if anything comes up, feel free to say it. But will you also share more how people can follow you and anything you want people to know about who
Well,
might watch this now or later?
on Instagram, I'm the Janet Lynn Show, but I'm just barely getting this show on the road. So right now, I just have my YouTube channel, which is devoted to the soul. But I am in the new year. I'm going to have my class, The Art of Devotion,
Hmm.
and I have so many good things planned.
Yes.
So,
So stay
I,
tuned. That's why,
yeah.
yeah,
So stay
people
tuned.
can,
You can find me on Instagram, the Janet Lynn Show, or YouTube, Devoted to the Soul.
yes. And then hopefully we'll have a live art show for you soon.
Yeah,
I'm excited about
yeah,
that because you have,
yeah.
how many paintings do you think you have
Oh, I don't know,
around that you could,
50. I don't know.
yeah,
I've got a lot.
that could be ready
And
to
it's
show?
funny, as I progress, my painting style is
Yeah,
changing and
I
changing.
bet. Oh my gosh,
So
I
it's
can only
so fun,
imagine.
it's because you're painting your consciousness in the
Mm,
method that I use,
mm,
which I love. I mean, it's intentional creativity and it's just so amazing. So I'm
exciting.
looking
Yeah.
forward to teaching that too because I am a certified teacher. So
Yes. Yeah.
a
That sounds like
certified
something the
teacher,
world
whatever
needs.
that means.
Yeah. But that
Yeah.
sounds exciting. I look forward to hearing
Oh,
more about that too.
yeah. So many good things.
Mm. Well, thanks so much, Janet.
Thank
So
you.
good to be with you. And I'll look forward to
Mhm.
playing with you more soon
Okay.
in many ways. And
Okay.
yes, and thank you all for being here, either live or later. And
Okay.
I'll put some things in the like the wording down below so people can find you too.
Okay.
So
See you
okay.
later.
Thanks,
Okay.
Janet. Thanks you
Bye-bye.
all.